Manhattan's got
Oh,
that
yeah.
screw you when you
Welcome
go.
you to the City
yeah, that's
Planning
really all I
Commission meeting for Tuesday, March 4th. Daisy, can you confirm that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided?
Yes, I can confirm the packet was posted and the required notice was provided.
Okay, thank you, Daisy. Roll call, please.
We'll call roll. We'll see Commissioner Sydow,
Here.
Commissioner Van Coveren,
Here?
Commissioner Alt,
Here.
Commissioner Rogers,
Here.
Commissioner Paget,
Here.
Commissioner Mike Sell,
Here.
Chair Waters.
Here.
So that constitutes a quorum for conducting business at today's meeting, and we have provided advance notice of this meeting, so you are free to proceed with today's meeting business.
Thank you. Are there any corrections to the minutes of the February 18th meeting? If not, I would entertain a motion for approval.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and second to approve the minutes of the February 18th meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, Commissioners, with the agenda, we are going to move administrative item 3.2 first on our business today. So, staff, if you could cover that, please.
We'll just give you an update. This was a replat that was filed in combination with the Church of the Cross and Kansas Wesleyan University. And the idea of the replat is that there's two residential dwellings that are north of the main church facility, and the replat was designed and intended to create separate lots for those residences. We've been working with the church and with Cobb Valley Engineering to try to get the utility lines located and clarifying their status as public or private. And the Church Cross has retained Cobb Valley Engineering to prepare a plat of existing conditions, but we don't have that in receipt yet, and so we don't feel confident being able to identify all the existing utility lines and clarifying their status. And so since field work is still being done, our recommendation is to further postpone consideration of this replat to your March 18th meeting to allow staff to work with Cobb Valley to confirm utility line locations and finalize easements. So I'd be open to any questions that commissioners might have, but we just don't feel this is quite in final form for you to act on, and would recommend that it be postponed to your next meeting on the 18th.
Okay, do we need a motion on that, Dean?
Yeah, we would
do.
need
Okay.
a motion to specifically postpone it to the March 18th
Okay,
meeting
all right.
date.
Madam Chairman, I'd recommend that I'd make a motion that we postpone the application P25-1/1A to the March 18th meeting.
Second.
There's been moved and second to move application P25-1/1A to the March 18th meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. All right, we'll move into public hearing, the three applications, Z25-1, PDD 25-1, and P23-7B.
Okay. We are transitioning, as you can tell, to laptops at the meeting, and we've also transitioned to a new agenda software. But a couple things I wanted to call your attention to that we placed at your places. One, I'll refer to it as a short cheat sheet, but we have a front and back handout up there that is a summary of the Magnolia Village Plan Development District proposal. So it just summarizes what is proposed on each of the residential lots and summarizes some elements of that. And so what you have is the standard is in the left-hand column, and then what they're specifically proposing is in the right-hand column. That's just to refer to, so you don't have to refer back to what is a fairly thick packet for you. The other thing is that there were some questions that were posed to staff following the February 4th hearing, and it is best if we don't reply just to individual commissioners, but to share the information and answers with all the decision makers. And so we have at your place up there a summary of the questions that were received since that meeting and our responses to those questions. We'll go over those at the conclusion of our staff report, but I just wanted to explain what those two items were. We're going to give you an overview of all three applications, and then we're going to go back and look at findings and alternatives and recommendations for each of those. So we'll start by saying that this is a public hearing, and it's relating to three applications. One is a rezoning for a commercial lot with frontage on Magnolia. The second is a planned development district application for two residential lots, lots 2 and 3, for apartment housing. And then the third application is a subdivision plat that would lay out and plat those 3 lots for development. So this is kind of our orientation. We're going to give you an overview of the commercial lot, then the middle planned development district, and then finally the plat, and then we'll go back and look at what your alternatives are for each of those. So we'll go ahead and proceed with this presentation. So we have item 3.1A, and that involves a request to change the zoning of the Magnolia frontage to C5 service commercial, and that tract of land is a little over an acre, and it's directly west of the American Ag Credit Facility that sits on Magnolia Road. The second request is to create a customized planned development district and an approved development plan for a 250-unit multifamily housing project, and that's broken into 2 parts. One is the middle portion, which is 152 horizontal apartment units, and then a southern portion, which is 98 multi-story apartment units, and that is on Lot 3. And then the third item, 3.1C, is the subdivision plat, creating those 3 lots and necessary easements and right-of-way. So I think you're familiar with the area, but the area that we're discussing this afternoon is the area that's highlighted in yellow there. The area in gray just to the right of it was Phase 1, as well as the American Ag Credit property, as well as Menards and Fairfield Inn. But our focus today is on the area outlined in yellow. And so this is the current zoning map, and of course the reason we're having a request to rezone this property is it's in the city, but it's currently zoned agricultural, pending what land uses should be developed. And then the city does have a future land use plan for this area, and so you can see that we have the red areas, which are commercial and future commercial, and then the brown area there highlights as urban residential, and the area to the southwest of that in the beige yellow color is Aeroplanes subdivision to the left, and then to the right is property that's owned by Larry and Susan Kerr, and then south of that is existing housing that was formerly base housing for the Schilling Air Force Base. And then there is a floodplain map, and so you can see that the floodplain for this area is confined to the Dry Creek Channel, except for the commercial lot up at the north end where there's a low spot, and then the One Vision property that's west of the creek is fairly low and flat, and a good part of it is in the shallow floodplain. And then the final big picture is the utilities for the area. And so this is all utility lines in green for sewer and blue for water that show the existing utility network in this area. And the important thing is that there's a 12-inch line on Magnolia. It loops down Virginia Drive and then loops back at the south end, and both those connect back to Centennial Road. So as we look at the request for the commercial lot, it's part of this larger parcel. The commercial parcel is 1.39 acres. The request is to go to C5, service commercial zoning. There's no identified specific commercial use at this time, so it's being done for future commercial development opportunities. This was annexed in 2023, but has remained zoned agricultural and unplatted. And it does need to be platted in order for the zoning to change, but we're discussing what the zoning should be first. So there's your reference of the commercial lot. So that's an overview of 3.1A, and then that is a survey of that particular property that just shows the boundaries and its shape. So then we're going to look at the middle portion, which is an overview of the Planned Development District application. So again, this is part of the larger parcel that was approved and purchased by Salina Destination, with Phase 1 being approved in 2023. And that was to annex, rezone, and plat 11 acres that constitute Phase 1, and that's directly west of Menards and is currently under construction if you've been out there to look at the site. So this is the application to develop Phase 2, and the request is to go from agricultural to a planned development district, multifamily residential. And so as a planned development district, there is a development plan that shows you the proposed location and layout of the housing units. So we have the apartments are on the northern portion of the property, and then on the southern portion we have 3 apartment buildings, and I guess that should be corrected to say 98 apartment units, because they have taken one of the units and turned it into a community mail room and community room. So we started with 99, but there are 98 units. One of the apartment buildings will have a community mail room in it. The majority of the utilities will be public in terms of water and sewer, but the access drive that comes in off Magnolia Road will be privately owned and maintained. The other thing that makes this unique is that the proposal is that the entrances from Magnolia Road and Virginia Drive are proposed to be gated for controlled access. We have 2 detention areas that are shown on the development plan. You can go to the next, Dustin. So these are modifications that have been requested as part of this, and one of the variations is to go from a 15-foot side yard separation. So for the benefit of the Planning Commission, if you have a project like the Salina Presbyterian Manor Villas or something like this, where we've got multiple buildings but they're not on individual lots, then what staff does is we project an imaginary property line between the buildings, and we measure to that imaginary property line between buildings. So in this case, there are no actual property lines, and so the minimum setback to a property line is 7.5 feet, which equals 15 between buildings. In this case, they're proposing to have 10-foot separation, or 5 foot to the imaginary property line. We wanted to clarify that the building code does allow homes to be built within 10 feet of each other, or having a 5-foot imaginary property line, without fire rating those buildings. And so the same thing would apply to a garage, a shed, a house, as long as it is 5 feet from a property line, it does not have to have special fire rated construction. I'm not sure that note 2 there, Dustin, that it matches up with what we have in the report.
Yes, that's correct. It's a leftover from the last.
Okay, so,
One space, so I think we were.
yeah. So what we have determined is that they have 238 spaces required for the horizontal apartments. Their plan provides 237, but we have determined that 3 of those need to be set aside and dedicated for the community mail pickup. So that leaves us to, this should correctly read that the request is to go from 238 parking spaces to 234 parking spaces for residents. And then they are requesting, they have some garages and some units that would have a 0 setback from the actual private roadway, and most of those garage units have apartments on top. And then the 4th variation is that in lieu of having a 45-foot right-of-way corridor for their private street, they're proposing to have a private street that meets the pavement width, but instead of having open right-of-way on each side, it has parking spaces that come off of that. And so instead of having just an open roadway, there will be parking stalls that will head in off of that drive aisle. So those are 4 things that are modifications from an existing development standard. And so there's the area depicted with the right-hand side showing the apartment lot, and the middle portion there is the horizontal apartment lot. And then the final plat application is to create 3 platted lots, 1 commercial lot, 1 horizontal apartment lot, and 1 lot for the south apartments. And so we have the same original property. We have the phase 1 that carved out 11.2 acres. That leaves 29.2 acres here with 3 lots. And so they're requesting that you approve a 3-lot subdivision. And so we have access into the development would be from a private access drive with a gated entry. It's labeled as Avery Lane on your plans. There is an entrance. The primary entrance is on Magnolia Road. There's a secondary entrance at the south end on Virginia Drive. In order for this plan to be carried out, Virginia Drive needs to be extended from where it terminates today to the south end of the development. The plan on the plat also provides right-of-way for an east-west street at the south end of the plat. And so just that is the total area being platted with the highlighted area, and then we've got a picture of the plat without the highlights, which is a little harder to read. We find that highlighting the area makes it a little clearer to identify. There's lots of easements, lots of lines, lots of dimensions and bearings. But we did want to talk, just a quick overview. The whole concept of horizontal housing, horizontal apartments, is new to Salina. It's new to city staff and new to jurisdictions around the country. So most jurisdictions don't have a set of development standards or guidelines for horizontal apartments because the concept is new, but essentially it's like clustering cottages or individual homes on one single platted lot. And in some cases, we've got a couple units that share walls with neighbors. But for the most part, these are separate horizontal units. And it's designed to maximize efficiency and internal circulation is essentially reduced to one long linear parking lot. And by doing it that way, they can place units back behind other units with pedestrian access. And so they are, you can place one unit behind each other and still have parking in front. We don't have internal hallways or staircases or plumbing cases because for the most part the units are detached from each other. And we don't have shared walls or ceilings, floors with neighbors above, so there's a little more quiet and privacy. And nationwide, this is becoming an increasingly attractive alternative to home ownership for young people entering the workforce and for older adults looking to downsize or simplify their living arrangement by being renters instead of owners. And I think one of the things we just want to go over is there's a lot of puzzle pieces here with some off-site components, and so we're going to talk about all those bullet points there, explain the off-site dedications, explain the existing infrastructure, what's happening with Magnolia Road, what's happening with Virginia Drive, and then the East-West Street. So we'll hit on those real quickly. So we have a property owner who's purchased the property that's directly south of Menards. They have provided us with a written commitment that they are going to dedicate the 50 feet of right-of-way to allow Virginia Drive to be extended south. There's a small piece in the corner that's owned by the Susan Care Trust. It's only 20 by 50, but it would still need to be dedicated to allow this to be built as shown. And then there's also a proposal to build a temporary hammerhead at the south end, and that would require a temporary turnaround easement to be dedicated because it's on other property as well. And then there is right-of-way for an east-west street on this plat, but to make it connect to Yeager Lane, there would need to be right-of-way dedicated by One Vision, which owns the property west of the creek. So this drawing just depicts the yellow area would have to be dedicated by GZH out of Wichita, the small blue area from the Care family. The red areas are being dedicated as part of this plat. And then we explained that there's 12-inch lines bordering this on all three sides, and the Director of Utilities, the City Engineer, and Fire Marshal are requiring that Phase 2 have a separate and independent fire suppression system from Phase 1. And so this will involve connecting a public line up at Magnolia, running it through the development and connecting it at the south end with the 12-inch line that runs along the south boundary. This provides a redundant source of flow. So again, you see the big picture with the outline, and we're essentially taking a line and running it right down through the center of the apartment area to provide domestic service and fire protection to those units. Then we want to touch on Magnolia Road. Again, we have a $1.5 million grant from KDOT, so that means that KDOT is going to pay $1.5 million towards those improvements, and anything that's not paid for by that grant would be the responsibility of the city. It's a multi-phase project that goes all the way to Centennial Road, but the Phase 1 that we're talking about stops at the west edge of this development, and so we're talking about a one-lane roundabout at the intersection. We're talking about widening Magnolia Road to 36 feet back-to-back. So it would look very similar to Schilling Road, what Schilling Road looks like, running from the railroad tracks over to Ohio Street. It would have a similar profile as that, 2 travel lanes and a center turning lane. It would have a hike-bike path on the south side and a 5-foot sidewalk on the north side. And then if you've driven that area, there's what's referred to as the Magnolia Road ditch that carries water from the Central Mall area under the interstate and over to Dry Creek. And the plan is to enclose that ditch and put it inside a box culvert. So those are all elements of that. The line on the left over here, that's essentially where the road terminates, the improvements. Let's see if I can't get my laser pointer to show up on there, but then the right-hand red line that's where the driveway connection coming out of Salina Destination would connect to Magnolia Road. And then over in this corner is a shared access that would provide access to the commercial lot and to the west half of the American Ag Credit lot. There is some commercial property that's west of American Ag Credit that could be developed, and if that's developed, then this would be the shared access for that. And then we have an overview of the traffic circle or roundabout that's being proposed at the intersection. And so you've got, we've got on the right-hand side is the view coming from the interstate. The bottom shows the profile of Virginia Drive, and then you can see that there are crosswalks shown on there. Those hatch lines indicate where the pedestrians would cross the roundabout area on all four sides. So that represents the street marking plan. And so we have Virginia Drive will run along the east boundary and of phase 2, and that will be extended to the south boundary. There'll be a new public storm sewer located in Virginia Drive as part of that. Shenandoah Drive will provide a street connection from the northeast corner of Aeroplanes to the south end of Virginia Drive. And it's our expectation, and the development agreement that's in place calls for those improvements to be financed by the establishment of a special benefit district. And so that allows the project to be bonded and paid out over a 20-year period. So this just re-summarizes the required right-of-way that's needed to do that project. And I think we have some drawings that show, again, the orange is the extensions of Virginia Drive and Shenandoah Drive. The green shows what needs to be dedicated as right-of-way from GZH, and the blue is showing what's dedicated on this plat, and the purple indicates what would have to happen from one vision. And so I'm gonna pause here and let Mr. Michelson, do you have something in order that you want to walk through in terms of the drawings, or is there, do we have any presentation per se of the site plan, the elevation drawings, the renderings, any of those things, or should we put the site plan up?
You just put up whatever you want.
Okay, let's put the site plan up then. The preliminary development plan. So this is what the Planning Commission is being asked to review and vote on and make a recommendation on. So our report has been our verbal presentation and summary and depiction of this plan, but you can get the orientation of Shenandoah Drive is at the lower left side, and that's the east-west street that would connect back across Dry Creek. At the lower left corner is the three apartment buildings that would have a total of 98 units, 33, 33, and 32, with one of them having a community mail room. And then we have the breakdown of the units, the horizontal units that consist of single-family horizontal units, as well as a few duplexes, as well as some that are two-story. So I don't know if you can take that table and kind of blow it up a little bit, Dustin, so we can read it, but if that's as big as it'll. Okay, so let's start at the top and walk through it. So in terms of the symbols on the plan, 26 of the units would be what's referred to as micro mansions. So those are going to be freestanding units with 4 walls, single story, and available in different bedroom options. Okay, so I don't know if we can enhance that, but this is in your packets, but it's a color-coded version of the same thing. But the mix is that we have the micro mansions, we have the units over the garage, we have some double stories that are narrower, but there would be 30 of those. They have double stories that have 3 bedrooms that are larger. They have 13 duplex units, then a single story 2-bedroom and a single story 3-bedroom. And so that you can see that within the Magnolia Village horizontal apartment area, that there is a whole mix of housing sizes and types within that whole area. And so I don't know if you would like to go to some of the character sketches or renderings, and maybe we could just walk through those, Dustin. So you do have in your packet some 3D views or renderings of the units. And so what we've tried to do in the packet is give you, we think it helps to not look at everything just from a bird's eye view, but to see it from a more 3D rendering. So this is a view of, if you could go back, Dustin. This is the view of the anticipated plan. So you'd have a road coming off of Magnolia Road and then a gated, divided entryway coming into the horizontal apartments. So that's a view looking to the south from Magnolia. And then this is just a view of the north end, where they have the community mail room for pickup of mail, and so that would be located at the north end inside the entry gate. Another view of the mail room, and then this is just proceeding south into the development, looking south from Magnolia Road. And so you can see that it is essentially a private drive or private street that's lined with head-in parking spaces, and so it's a very lineal arrangement. And so there's another view of the different housing types and parking arrangement. And then a view from the south looking back north, and then the areas where you have units stacked behind each other, there's a network of sidewalks and walkways to interconnect and provide access to the various units. And so if you were looking at this from how it would look from Magnolia Road looking off to the south or southwest, that is a view of how the horizontal apartments would be laid out, with the private street, Avery Lane, running through the middle, and then at the south end connecting back to Virginia Drive, and off to the top of that is the Phase 1 apartments that are under construction. And so just another view of that looking back to the northwest.
Is there a view of the the taller buildings?
Not a 3D rendering.
Not a 3D rendering. We have some elevations of what they would look like that are in your
Right.
packet, and we may be able to call those up, but I don't think they're in these renderings in terms of, we can tell you that the tallest unit in the horizontal apartments is 24 feet, and these units are 50 feet. But these units do not have any outward decks or balconies. So there's not balconies that are looking out over anywhere, or any balconies in terms of looking out over somebody else's property or the horizontal apartment. So they'll have the stairway and the decks, but there'll be no individual decks on the back of any of the units. So I think before we go back and look at alternatives and recommendations, I just wanted to cover some of the questions that we'd received after yesterday's meeting and or after the February 4th meeting, excuse me. And one of the questions was, what is the purpose of having the horizontal apartment portion of the subdivision gated and not the vertical apartment portion? Our response is that that's best answered by the developer and what their concept is. It's staff's understanding that the design is intended to provide a variety of different housing types, and that they are setting apart the garden-style apartments from the horizontal apartments, and so the gating and the fencing is designed to do that. And the other thing we would point out is that the amenities that are available in Phase 1 are also going to be accessible and available to all the persons occupying the Phase 2 area. The second question that was posed was, is the rent income-based? And the answer is no. None of the units within Phase 1 or Phase 2 would have income-based rent prices. The Phase 1 area that's currently under construction does have some rent limits that are written into the development agreement, but that there are no such limits in Phase 2. Regarding the density of both the horizontal and vertical apartments conform with the density limitations of the R2 zoning district. And we did put a table in your packet there that basically shows that even though it appears close together and all that, the density within the horizontal apartments is slightly below 7 units an acre, and that would be consistent with the density of a small lot residential subdivision. And so obviously the apartments that are multi-story with the multiple stories, that density is over 20 units an acre, but both densities are within what the R2.5 would allow. The request to go from 15 feet to 10 feet, we've noted, is allowed by the building code without having to fire rate the exterior walls. Fourth question was, will there be special assessment taxes because of the road improvements? The answer to that is it's anticipated that special assessments would be used to finance Virginia Drive and Shenandoah Drive, but we don't have a specific applications yet, but that's the anticipated method of financing. And then there's questions about the future street connection to aeroplanes. Right now in aeroplanes, there's only one public street connection, and that's out to Centennial Road. There's no other public street connections. The Shenandoah Drive street connection is part of a broader plan to ensure that this area is served with a street network and also provides us a second way in to aeroplanes. Long-term, Virginia Drive would eventually extend between Magnolia Road and Schilling Road. And then south of that, Marcella Drive that starts at Schilling Road would eventually connect down to Waterwell Road. And so that would be a parallel connection to the interstate. Are the public comments regarding environmental contamination relevant? We have provided a memo in your packet from Dragon Corporation, who's working on the groundwater remediation with the Airport Authority and the Corps of Engineers and KDHE, and their memo summarizes the findings of the environmental testing that was conducted on this site, and they've concluded that there's not any unacceptable risk either for development of the property or for future residents. And then the final question was what the design and approval process was for the roundabout at the intersection. I think I clarified at the last meeting that the Planning Commission is making a recommendation on the Magnolia Village plan development plans and not necessarily making a recommendation on Magnolia Road, because that's a KDOT project and KDOT decides what the final design that they are willing to approve and fund. And so it's not really a place for where there's going to be the recommendation or vote that relates directly to that design. And so we'll go back to your the findings and your alternatives for action on these cases. So for the commercial piece, we think that because of its frontage on Magnolia Road and its visibility from the interstate and the related commercial uses, that it is appropriate and suitable for commercial development. It is adjacent to other C5 zoned development, and so a change would be compatible with the zoning and uses of nearby property. There are public utilities in place that can serve the commercial lot, and this lot was carved out of the urban residential area and still shows as future commercial. So as it relates to the commercial lot, you could recommend approval of straight C5 zoning as requested. You could recommend approval of a zoning change to Plan C5 or PDD C5. You could postpone consideration of the request, or you could recommend denial of the request for commercial zoning. So that would be item 3.1A. On 3.1A, we are supportive of commercial zoning, but we think that this should be made a part of the Magnolia Village Plan Development District to match the plan zoning to the east. And so if lots 1, 2, and 3 are all part of the same subdivision, and we think they should all be part of the Magnolia Village Plan Development, so it's an integrated development, and therefore if you're inclined to recommend C5 zoning, we would recommend it be done as a PDD C5, so it's integrated in with the rest of the Dry Creek addition, number 2. As it relates to the planned development district portion, we have found that the plan conforms with the R2.5 regulations except for the side yard building separations and the off-street parking requirements, but they have closed the gap, so it's only 4 spaces short of what would be required for the horizontal apartments. The Dragon Corporation has provided an analysis that determined that the existing groundwater plume does not pose an unacceptable environmental risk for development of the property. The physical attributes of the property, the availability of utilities make it suitable for multifamily development, and the density is consistent with what was approved for phase 1. We don't currently have multimodal connectivity on West Magnolia, but this apartment site is located in proximity to K-State Salina campus and the airport employment area, so it's well situated. The site meets the location criteria in the comprehensive plan, and it looks to us that the topography, the utilities, and the street access, that this could be developed, and if done under plan development standards, would not adversely affect or harm the value or use of a potential development of adjacent properties. The surrounding street network is capable of accommodating the additional traffic once all those improvements are completed. And our comprehensive plan does show this as urban residential, so approval of the apartment project would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so as it relates to the horizontal apartments, you have 5 different alternatives, and perhaps these could be split, but the first alternative is to approve the zoning change for lots 2 and 3, subject to any conditions and limitations the commission thinks is appropriate, including, and that would include the 4 modifications requested by the applicant. You could improve it subject to certain revisions being made to the development plan. So, for example, you could approve the plan, and if you say, well, I like the plan except for I don't like the idea of the gated controlled access, you could approve it with the plan recommendation that the plan be revised to eliminate the gated access. That's just one example, but that would just be revisions to the plan layout. You could approve the application and improve it, but not including the 4 modifications requested by the applicant. If that option was chosen, it would require a substantial redesign of the horizontal apartment portion of the project. You could postpone consideration of the application to a future meeting date if you think you need additional information about the proposal, or you could recommend that the application to change the zoning be denied. And then for we have a recommendation and a number of conditions that we can get back to as discussions ensue. But then I think, do we have a piece for the plat as well, Dustin? So in terms of the plat, you could recommend approval as submitted. You could recommend it subject to the recommended conditions. You could postpone to a future meeting date if you think there are still technical issues, or you recommend denial of the plat, citing whatever criteria you think has not been met. So we have summarized here just some conditions that we would recommend relating to the plat, including utilities being placed underground, a sidewalk being constructed on Virginia Drive, having the public improvements complete before we have any vertical construction, and we need a revised stamped drainage plan that finalizes all the calculations and the pond design, maintenance agreement relating to the maintenance of those ponds, and then to get a revised drawing with all the technical corrections before we attempt to record the plat. If you're not, if you feel like the plat should be postponed to a future meeting date, that would be an option, or if you don't think the criteria for infrastructure connectivity are met, you could recommend that the plat be denied. But I think we've tried to cover as much ground as we can. We realize there's lots of drawings and illustrations in the packet. If there's something in your packet you can't see very clearly, then ask Mr. Michelson if he can bring it up on the screen. But I think at this point in time, it's time to pause for questions. We do have some other representatives of city staff, and we have the applicants present, as well as their designers.
Okay, thank you, Dean and staff. Commissioners, I open it up for questions with the staff.
Was there a traffic study done, Dean, either by the city, by KDOT, or by a third party?
There was a traffic study done, but the primary purpose of the traffic study was to determine if there were intersection improvements or a traffic signal warranted at the Virginia Drive, Magnolia Road intersection. And with the improvements to the intersection already being under design, and with the roundabout design chosen in lieu of a traffic circle, we provided some calculations about traffic generation in the staff report, but the traffic study that was provided did not reach a conclusion that a traffic signal was warranted yet, even if this were built as proposed.
Was it noted how emergency vehicles would be able to get into the gated community? I know that was brought up last time.
The final design of that has not been worked out. I think we have the fire marshal is joined via Zoom, but we have a recommended condition that the plans and specifications for the gated entryways have to be reviewed and approved by the fire marshal before they're installed. There's been some discussions, and there's also been some changes made within the community. We already have preempters that emergency vehicles use at intersections like Crawford and Ohio that allow them to control those signals, but that is changing, and so part of it is waiting to see what is going to be used there, and then it would make sense to use that for emergency vehicles, because we don't want to have a solution that only provides access for fire but not police. So we need to have one that will work for both. I don't know, is Mr. Kabasic on there where he could join us and make a comment?
I'm here. I did speak with the police department and got their recommendations also. They would like to see that more of the keypad and a specific code for police and a specific code for fire. And the developers we've talked about that a little bit, and it's a much more feasible and cheaper option than going to some technology that, in 3 or 4 years might be outdated and have to redo it. So.
And that's condition number 12 on the recommended PDD conditions is final plans and specifications for the proposed entry gates are subject to review and approval by the fire marshal, and any subsequent modifications are subject to additional review and approval by the fire marshal. So.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of staff?
I think at the last meeting, there was some concern about the multi-story structure at the south end, why that wouldn't be at the north end, and then all the horizontal ones toward the south to blend into the single-family homes in that area. Has that been addressed or discussed? I know you mentioned there aren't any decks, but just curious.
Well, it's been discussed, and it was mentioned at the last meeting. The apartments aren't the most affected property is the Keir residence, but the apartments themselves, the buildings, are 83 feet north of Shenandoah Drive, and then there's the 60 feet of the street, and then there's a tree line. So you have that buffer. We have discussed, and we can't put words in the mouth of the developers, and they're here to address that, but their concept was for the horizontal apartments to be the first area that was entered off of Magnolia Road, and so that's why they have that closest to Magnolia Road, so that it has a Magnolia Road entrance. But I think that the question of why the horizontals in the middle, and the taller ones that are south is best addressed by the applicants and their designers.
All right. Before we go to the applicant, are there any other questions of staff? All right, hearing none, would the applicant like to speak? I guess starting with this last comment. Please state your name and address for the record.
Dustin Marsh, 250 North Water, Wichita, Kansas. I'm with Murphin Inc. And part of the development team, we've got Buck Driggs and Cord Albers, Jeremy Hurt here joining me. I'll go back to the kind of the land plan to touch base on that, with the idea that the horizontal apartments is going to drive a little bit different market for us, and we really want that to be a resort style community. And in order to achieve that, in the land plan there, and utilizing the existing riparian corridor and the entrance off Magnolia, just set up well for us to use the phase 1 amenities there with our horizontal apartments. And then Dean did a nice job of kind of alluding to that screening and separation excuse me, that we'll have with Shenandoah Drive and our 3 multifamily buildings there on the south side of phase 2.
Thank you.
So I think if you look at the orientation, the buildings, the side walls of those 2 buildings are what is facing south, not the individual residences. So it's not like there's windows or units there that are looking out directly over the care residence, which is located down in more towards where Virginia Drive extended is. And so there's an offset there between where the apartments are and where the dwelling actually is. And so they've done their best to orient the buildings so you're not having the main side or the 3rd floor window side looking out over the CARES property.
Okay, are there any other questions of the applicant?
The garage units, are those included, like, are they gonna have to, sorry, let me restart. Are those included in one of the rental units, or is that gonna be separate if somebody just wants a garage, that they can add that to what their rent would be or something like that?
Yeah, correct, like an a la carte option.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry,
Go ahead.
In the event that nobody wants to add these garages, unlikely, but then there's 27 spaces that aren't being accounted for, I guess, in the parking situation. I guess, yeah, is that accounted? Is that typical, Dean? I guess if nobody wants to purchase a garage unit separately,
Well,
or it's short spaces now.
From the standpoint of someone who has only a single car garage and a single driveway, my residence meets our parking requirements because I have 2 off-street spaces. One's in the garage and one's in the driveway. But people aren't forced to park in their garage. Some people put wings on the side of their driveway or whatever. Some people fill their garages with stuff and can't get their cars in there, but we still count it as a space. So we still would count what's in the garage as an available space for a resident to use. And so from our standpoint, being in the garage, it's covered parking as opposed to uncovered parking, and there is a cost associated with it, but from our standpoint, it still counts as available parking. It's available to a resident if they want to use it, just like a garage is available to a homeowner, and they can choose to put their car in it or they can choose to store their stuff in it. But we just make sure that there's 2 spaces available when the unit's built.
But there's usually a driveway in front of that, and in this case, there is none. Am I correct?
Well, there'll be overhead doors and there'll be a driveway right there. Dustin, do you have a visible view of that we can call up to show how it looks?
I'm gonna step away and let Jeremy kind of take this one.
Yeah, I might kind of address that. I think at some point, we as owners, the market kind of dictates that. So if that extreme condition would happen, then all of a sudden, we're probably giving garages away for free to allow for parking. If we're fortunate enough to be full, and we own a lot of apartment communities, and unfortunately, none of them are 100% full, all the time. You always have turnover. You always have units that need to be painted, leased, move in. So you always have a little bit of vacancy, even when you're doing extremely, extremely well. So we just don't foresee that happening. And the fact that we only have a limited number of garages, we think those will go probably very quickly in our lease up.
Okay.
So if you look at this view here, it's the access lane that goes through the development would be passing in front of these garage doors. So anybody who has a garage unit would just be able to pull into it off of Averly Lane.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant?
What options are you going to have for EV charging?
We don't have any plan, but in some other cases, what we have done is the resident has suggested that they have a Tesla or something that they want to charge, and we allow them then to rent a garage and install the electric to do so. So we would allow that to happen, but normally the resident would install or pay to have that installed for that upgrade. Yeah.
And you've had that happen before in other...
We have, yeah, in Wichita.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, I open it up for discussion, or if you have any other questions of staff, please bring those forward.
Yeah, and as we take these up one by one, we'll put our alternatives back up on the screen. And I think it's, once you've had your discussion and amongst yourselves, we'll try to take these one by one, 3.1A, 3.1B, 3.1C, and let you walk through each of those and take them one by one. But we'll go back to those points so that we can walk through what your alternatives are.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions from anyone in the audience or online?
I don't see any members of the public asking to speak, and it's all
Right.
city staff. And
Okay, thank you, Mr. Michelson. All right, commissioners, I open it up for discussion. We will first cover application Z25-1, and if Dean, you want to give a quick overview again of that one?
So again, this is the request to rezone the front part for commercial use, and we have provided some findings there that we think it has Magnolia Road frontage. It's adjacent to other C5 zone property, which would include American Ag Credit and the Magnolia Commons development. We have the utilities we need to support commercial development, and we have an arterial street that's going to be improved. So if you could go to what our alternatives are. So under alternative 1, if you just had straight commercial zoning, there would be no restrictions, no site plan review, no review to see how it coordinated with the rest of the Magnolia Village development. If you chose option 2, what a PDD C5 would mean is if once there was a use proposed for that property, that site development plan would come back for the Planning Commission's review. We've recommended alternative 2 as a PDD C5 for 2 reasons. One, that is consistent with what was done with Menards, with Fairfield Inn, and with American Ag Credit, which was all reviewed by the Planning Commission. And it's also consistent with the rest of the development and would allow us to essentially do a single ordinance for the whole Magnolia Village PDD instead of people having looked two places to see what the ground rules are. So our recommendation as to the commercial zoning pieces, that the zoning change be approved to Plan Development C5 subject to satisfactory platting of the property and any other conditions you might have related to commercial development. But the plan is that access would be from the access point that we showed you. They are going to get their sewer service from the south Phase 1 area. They've got their water service available from multiple directions, including Magnolia Road, and then they have determined that the commercial runoff would go into the detention pond for Phase 1 apartments and then go under the road and over to Dry Creek. So that's how that would be done. But in terms of the layout, the uses, how it's designed and fits under Alternative 2, that simply means that they can market it for any C5 use, but the actual final layout would come back to you to review at a later date.
All right, Commissioners, I open it up for a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion that we approve application Z25-1 with option number 2 as a PDD C5.
I'd second that.
Okay, it's been moved and second to approve application Z25-1 following staff's recommendation of alternative number 2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Commissioners. We'll now move on to PDD 25-1.
So that addresses Lot 1. This item addresses Lots 2, which is the horizontal and multi-story apartments. We kind of walked through the findings that would support that, but we have reviewed the plans, and as we noted, except for the separation between buildings being 10 instead of 15, and except for the reduction or modification in parking being requested, this plan comply with lot coverage, height, density, all those things is conforming. We provided you with a letter that was prepared by Dragon Corporation, who has been involved with the groundwater cleanup at the airport area, and we think that addresses environmental concerns, or at least gets it on the record. And the physical attributes of this property are suitable for multifamily development. We are well situated in terms of K-State Salina and airport employment area in terms of people who need rental housing, including students and workers. If you could go to the next one, Dustin. So we do think that developing multifamily here, and even with the plan as it's laid out and presented, that it will not harm the living conditions, value, use, and potential development of adjacent properties and surrounding neighborhood. We know, we don't know what the timeline is or long-term, but it's a fairly good bet that the property that's currently occupied by the CARES residents will be developed into something else in the near future, and so this is not going to make that property less likely to be developed or reduce its development potential. If you look at Magnolia Road, Virginia Drive, the construction of Shenandoah Drive, we have a street network that's capable of handling the traffic that's generated by this housing development once all those improvements are complete, and the multifamily as proposed is consistent with the comprehensive plan. So again, I'll walk down through the implications of this. So under option 1, you're saying you've reviewed the plan, you've reviewed the conditions that staff was recommending, you've reviewed the 4 modifications that are requested as part of the plan, and you are comfortable recommending approval of that as submitted. Under option 2, that would be approval of the zoning change, approval of the plan that was presented, including the modifications, but there might be some site-related aspect to the plan that you would like to see revised, and so that would allow, that would be saying the zoning's approved, the plan's approved, subject to certain revisions being made to the specifics of the plan that the motion maker would need to articulate. The third one is you're saying that you're comfortable with the zoning change, but you're not supportive of the modifications that are being requested, and so if that that were the it's not the same as denial, because you're saying you're comfortable with the zoning change but not with the modifications. But the modifications are such a fundamental part of the horizontal apartment concept that it would require a real redesign of the project if that was the option chosen. Option 4 would be postponement, and that would mean that either staff or the applicant has not provided you with all the information that you think is needed about the proposal, or option 5 is to deny the rezoning because you don't think this should be multifamily housing and it should be something else. So those would be the 5 options for motions. And then so you can see that on these conditions, we've got conditions related to development of lot 1, the development of lot 2. We have summarized those modifications there. We've got the development rules for lot 3, and then what this means is this is a preliminary plan, so before they actually start building anything, and once they have their zoning in place, they're going to come back to you with their final plan, and that's going to get more into detail with landscaping, details about how the gate would work, those types of things. So this is preliminary approval. They would come back for a final for the apartment piece. All utilities have to be placed underground. They have to provide a sidewalk connection. They're going to need to have their utilities and functional fire suppression in place before they start going vertical. And then the other items is that we're going to have maintenance agreements about the maintenance of the pond, maintenance of the private street, Avery Lane, maintenance of the landscaping. If you want to go to the next page, Dustin. So these just highlight and reinforce those things. So those are all pieces that will have to be done before they finally occupy the development, but we would have maintenance agreements in place. All of those are set out in the development agreement. Item 12, again, is that they would have to work with the fire marshal to get their final specifications for how the gate would be accessed by emergency personnel. And then 13th is just this summary that says planned development districts are what you see is what you get zoning, and so 13 just reinforces that what is presented to the commission is what gets built without any changes or switches unless they come back to you. So those are the recommended conditions, and if you want to go back to the 5 alternatives, we'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Dean. I open it up to the commissioners for discussion or a motion.
Well, Madam Chair, I'd make a motion that we approve application P25-1 with alternative number 1, including the 4 conditions requested by the applicant, and including the conditions that the staff has recommended on page 12 of the application or page 36 of the laptop.
Okay. Is there a second to this motion?
I'd second it.
Okay, it's been moved and second to approve application PDD 25-1 with staff's recommendation of number 1 with the 4 PDD modifications as well as the staff recommendations in the report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, commissioners. All right, staff will move into application P 23-7B.
We just have the final plat, and this is the skeleton or framework for how they build around. This just creates their 3 building lots, and just to review the part that's under their control, they have addressed the easement dedications, the right-of-way for Virginia Drive that they control. They're dedicating right-of-way for the east-west street that allows that connection. And we have written confirmation from GZH that they will dedicate the other piece of Virginia Drive. And that will be done by separate instrument outside the plat, as will the right-of-way from the CARES. So we think they have done what they need to do and show with their preliminary plat, and so our recommendation would be to approve the final plat of Dry Creek Addition Number 2 as proposed.
All right, commissioners, I open it up for discussion or a motion.
Okay. Madam Chair, I make a motion that we approve application P23-7B as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved to second to approve application P 23-7B as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you to the staff, the applicant, the city staff, the commissioners for these
Well, we realized
important
this was a tough one to
Yes.
convert to the laptop method, but we didn't have control over that. We just hope that we provided you with thick information, but good information, so.
Okay.
It was thick. Expect to see that on the New York Times novel list.
All right, staff, is there any other unfinished business?
We will try to get the final plat for the Johnson Edition Number 2 resolved at your next meeting. The next scheduled meeting date after that is April 1st. We don't presently have anything filed for that, and so we will let you know about that. If you have any feedback about being able to access or open your packets or the laptops or anything like that, we are doing it first before the city commission converts to that, so you guys are kind of the test case to see how it's working. But we are the ones that are testing out the new method, and at some point the stuff that's in the agenda will be able to be projected on those 2 screens there.
To note, I wasn't able to get on my TikTok account.
Oh, gosh.
I don't have one, I'm just kidding.
You have to take that up with Daisy.
All right.
So we don't have anything further for you
Okay.
this evening, other than we will meet the 18th, and we will let you know for sure about April 1st.
Dustin, is there anyone online that cares to speak?
We do not have anybody online who can
Right.
speak.
I open it up for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Been moved and second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you.